Well, the First Amendment in the United States says that Congress shall make no law abridging the right of a free press. It doesn't say shall make no right abridging Fox to cover the news or CNN to cover the news. And to say that some group is journalists and another group is not just goes against the entire spirit of the Constitution. That law was written to protect people like the pamphleteers, Thomas Paine, E. Publius, who published the Federalist Papers, the people who, for the most part, weren't making a living and certainly weren't working for a major media corporation. And so the suggestion that we should create a law to protect corporate media and neglect the independents that are doing some of the most important work is insulting to me. And you asked, do I have any regrets? Was it worth it? Well, I have no regrets. The idea that my incarceration helped propel a law to be passed that wouldn't have protected me leaves grave doubts in my mind as to whether it was worth it or not. I absolutely don't regret what I did. I still support the stand that I took, but it'd be a lot easier for me to say it was well worth it if I knew that there was a law in the books that would have protected me and other people like myself. Well, you suggest that in other countries, traditional media looks down upon bloggers and the like with contempt, but the reality is that's just as true in the United States as it is anywhere else. But I think that through some very strong outreach, some wide swath of support, and also the fact that we're here in San Francisco, I was able to sign to change that dialogue and plant the seed that if they come after the independent journalist, it's just the first step in coming after you, the professional journalist. There's a famous poem that I think was written by a monk during World War II that says something along the lines of, and I'm very loosely paraphrasing, first they came after the homosexuals and I didn't do anything because I wasn't gay, and then they came after the Jews and I didn't do anything because I wasn't a Jew, and eventually they came after me and there was no one left to come to my aid. And I think that sort of ideology had some strong resonance and allowed many members of the corporate media, many news organizations such as Reporters Committee for the Free Press, Reporters Without Borders, the Committee to Protect Journalists, etc., the list goes on and on. They were able to realize that first it's me and next it's them. And in fact, it's not even a question of next it's them, because just a year before I was incarcerated, a woman named Judy Miller from the New York Times found herself in prison, and I'd rather not discuss her journalistic history per se, but she was jailed for the same reasons. So this is an issue that affects both small independent journalists as well as large corporate journalists such as Judy. When it comes to this question of did the journalist eventually give up, there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of subtle things that really are not valid, in my opinion, for us to look at. For instance, a lot of people say that in my case, I gave up. I eventually published the video so the world could see there was nothing on it. And in the reports we read, it sounded like my case was all about the video and not about the testimony, the identities of the people that were there. So I don't think I gave up at all. I held on to a tape and saw it through all the appeals process because I thought it was a fight worth fighting. But once I had lost that fight, I didn't really see a reason to protect a tape with nothing on it. And in Judy's behalf, I have to say that from the looks of it, at least one perspective, Scooter Libby said, all right, go ahead and disclose your source, that we can do that, that's fine. And if that is in fact what happened, then she didn't give up per se, her source gave up. And whether that's a fortunate resolution, an unfortunate resolution, I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think it's necessarily fair to say Judy gave up in the end, any more than it's fair to say that I gave up. It changed my life in so many ways. It's really hard for me to identify all of them, but I guess I can start by saying that it gave me a perspective on the federal justice system, the criminal justice system, that led me to realize that it is anything but just. People find themselves caught in the legal system, and unless they have the money, especially when it comes to federal court, unless they have the money to hire a Top Gun attorney at often hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're left hanging. The public defender system is not equivalent to a private attorney. In fact, many public defenders in the federal system have never argued a case in their life. They're deal makers. You've been indicted with a federal crime, they're going to get you to plead guilty and get you the least amount of time they can. It's an entirely different thing than fighting a case. I learned firsthand about people who had been charged with illegal re-entry. So these are people whose only crime that they're currently being held for, admittedly some of them do have a past criminal history, is crossing an imaginary line that we like to call a border. Now these people end up spending up to 20 years in prison. For the most part it's 3 years, but the maximum penalty is 20 years. And during that time, they're forced to work, building infrastructure or industry that helps the government. And the way I see it, that's not making prisoners do their fair share, that's slavery. It's 21st century slavery because we lock you up, make you work for us for practically no pay. We're talking 10 cents an hour. We also bill a restitution to these people to compensate the victims being whom I'm not sure, I guess the United States itself, which oftentimes is close to the amount of money that they earned while in prison. But it solves this little problem that slavery had, which was, what do you do when people can't work anymore? Well, we don't have to hold them anymore. We just deport them back once they've completed their sentence. So to me, what we have now is the same slavery system we were talking about in the 1700s when the United States was founded, except for it's a little different. The color of the skin of most of the people that have been turned into slaves is a slightly lighter hue, but the same issue is at play. We have people that are forced to work for doing nothing more than trying to make a better life for themselves, and I think that's an absolute travesty.